friends. I just watched a video. The speaker was a guy named David Story, and I found it through a channel called Developmental Politics, which I've followed for a while. The founder of that channel is a guy named Steve McIntosh, and he's basically kind of a thought pioneer coming out of a school of philosophy that I studied a great deal when I was younger, generally attributed to or credited to a philosopher named Ken Wilber, who was kind of the founder of integral philosophy. He wrote a ton of books, 20 or 30 or more books, between the kind of, I think, maybe late 80s, mid to late 80s up through, I think he's still writing. But it's very hard to summarize this in any kind of satisfactory way, but essentially what an integral perspective or an integral worldview attempts to do is understand the evolution of worldviews themselves to be phases of consciousness evolution, chronologically unfolding phases of conscious evolution, either in an individual, as an individual's worldview evolves and expands, or in a society or a culture where we can see these trends as far as like the values of a group, the values of a community, or a network. We see those things change, those values evolve over time, and an integral perspective sort of starts from the idea that worldviews evolve. They move through succeeding levels of inclusion as a worldview expands. The boundary that we draw around the in-group and the out-group, us and them, becomes defined at a slightly larger scale each time. But there's a lot of complexity to this, because simply moving intellectually to a place where we might say, okay, now I see myself as a citizen of the world, not as a citizen of my country, right? Or as a member of my city or community instead of just a member of my family, right? Those are leaps that happen generally. A lot of our worldview evolution happens in childhood, and then as we get to be adults, we sort of get to choose whether we want to keep evolving or whether we're like, I'm good here. I think I've gone as far as I want to go. But integral, Ken Wilber as a kind of integral pioneer, and the people who have come out of that, who have kind of spun out of that school and into sometimes more specific areas of exploration, like, for example, politics. Steve McIntosh really goes deeply into politics, employing the tools and the map, in some ways, of an integral understanding of worldview evolution. But a lot of the people who've come out of that have recognized that this growth through worldview expansion is not a linear thing. And even in one individual, you can sort of advance to a level of higher development in one area of your life and not advance in other areas. So your actual aggregate kind of like expression in the world might either be dramatically different depending on context, depending on what's happening in the moment. We might be at one level 1 minute and then at a drastically different level another minute. If our emotional intelligence is down here, but our intellectual is up here, we can operate sort of high flying over here, but then become borderline children again when it comes to navigating the world of our emotions, and or the kind of non-linearity of our own growth in different areas of our life can cause us to kind of create compromise perspectives that let us hold different parts of our worldview loosely coherent, even if there's contradiction there, even if there's not total harmony among the pieces parts of our perspective. We can kind of convince ourselves that what we have is a coherent worldview. And that happens a lot. And that happens especially in politics. Or maybe it's just especially visible in politics, where we might resonate with various political stances or issues in a certain way. The issue by issue, we might have real investment or real kind of like passion for some issues or others, but that doesn't create necessarily a synthesized and coherent whole or a platform. It becomes really easy to see when you start trying to implement. Like, politicians hit this problem, I think, a lot. If you actually try to implement solutions, or even just map the way forward for how to take care of certain issues, you hit snags, or you different issues start to kind of rub up against each other, and you have to either make choices or find novel, new solutions that somehow manage to accommodate seemingly contradictory agendas. And I think this is why, the level of complexity that human worldviews are at now, that just human consciousness is at this point in history, is partly part of the problem. So much of the world, so many of us are so aware, and yet we're not, as a sum total society, we're not yet at the place where the solutions for how to institutionalize and make broad agreement and broad large-scale investment in the kinds of solutions that are ever more urgent to our not just survival, but first urgent for our survival, and then for us to continue to thrive and continue to evolve. It's not so obvious how we're going to do that. And it's not so obvious that anybody who's, there's a lot of strong opinions out there, but it's not obvious that any of those opinions have the answer. There's a fair amount of heat, but there's not as much light. And part of what I'm going through right now, just on a personal level, is a engaging with, what do I do every day, or what do I do regularly that I do almost unprompted? What is the gift that I give? What is the thing that I'm drawn towards? What draws me in? Because as much as I have pursued passions and wonderful disciplines, practices, and professional engagements all my life, basically, or for all my adult life. I have a sense that there are elements in me that haven't been expressed, that I haven't allowed myself to take seriously. But you start talking about the evolution of worldviews and the way we understand meaning making as a human species, and especially as highly evolved, kind of educated, living in relatively affluent Western countries, how we make meaning and what's going right about that and what's going wrong. I just perk up. It makes me really come alive. And if you've been following my posts for any amount of time, you've probably heard me talk about I'm in a transitional phase right now. I've been working in a certain way for quite some time, and there's part of me that has been longing recently to go in a direction, and I don't have much to go on other than the pull, other than the sort of gravitational pull of interest, and I need to be, I do a fair amount of reflection about, like, well, is this just compulsive habit? Is there something in me that's just, this is just habitual? This is what my mind likes to do because it's habitual? Or is this really a passion? But I have to say, when I hear a smart person with a grasp of philosophy talk about the world and how we might create positive change and how we might alleviate some of the toxicity and dysfunction that our society seems to be experiencing on a large scale, I do have a sense of mission there. I do have a sense of, this is something I understand. This is something that I get. And I have empathy for all sides. I can kind of see the need for healing in all of the related groups, all the different factions that are many times antagonistic to each other in our culture. So I'm saying this out loud to myself and to you, but I'm saying this out loud in order to discover if this is somewhere that I can go, in order to see if this is something that I can actually pursue. So if you're still watching, you're down the rabbit hole with me now. And you also have a high tolerance for pursuing an unformed idea, a not fully formed idea, and being in discovery. Because I'm certainly in discovery. And I appreciate you. Thank you for watching. And this is not over. So have a great day, and I will see you soon.